I cannot help thinking that the best way of knowing God is to love many things. Love this friend, this person, this thing, whatever you like, and you will be on the right road to understanding God better. But you must love with a sublime, genuine, profound sympathy, with devotion, with intelligence. That will lead to God. That will lead to an unshakable faith. Vincent van Gogh might just be one of the most underappreciated and unrecognized figures of Christian art amongst Christians, which isn't completely without its reasons. Understandably, his most iconic paintings are not of biblical scenes or depictions of saints, and less understandably, Van Gogh may be unpopular as a Christian figure because of the way that his life ended. But regardless of how his life ended, how he lived and understood his life is one of the most interesting stories of Christianity in the modern world that I have ever come across. Van Gogh was a son of a theologian. He studied to be a theologian himself. He wanted to be a preacher and he even tried to be a missionary. But in the end, his unorthodox approach to Christianity got him rejected from all of these positions. And it was these rejections that, for better or for worse, led him to express his yearnings through art instead of through the church. And even though his paintings aren't obviously Christian, their richness in philosophy and expressiveness make us wonder that, what does it actually mean for art to be Christian? And even greater than this, what does it mean to be Christian in this modern day and age? These are precisely the questions that Van Gogh tried to answer with his life, and he was rejected for most of it. Vincent Willem van Gogh lived most of his life as an unhappy son, teacher, bookstore clerk, and as a rejected preacher and missionary before his father suggested to admit him to an asylum, at which point Vincent finally enrolled himself in an art academy, only 10 years before his death. This man did not need to read a Dostoevsky novel. With his life, he was the Dostoevsky novel. He enrolled in the art academy only to disagree with most of the artistic traditions. He once told an instructor that they didn't know the slightest thing about a woman's body, which he must have known a lot about given his history of brothels. So he spent his artistic career nurturing his own style, clinging onto art as a remedy for despair and as his solace that his life could still have purpose. But okay, let's go back. His very first profession wasn't as an artist, but as an art dealer because of his family connections. He was first an art dealer in London and then in Paris, but it was during that period of his life that he became more religiously inclined, as well as resentful of the way that his profession commodified beauty. So in Paris, he gave up being an art dealer and returned to England in Ramsgate to become a teacher, and then later he even became an assistant minister. He was able to preach a sermon, and miraculously a manuscript of this sermon has survived, giving us a window into his religious thought. His sermon was on Psalm 119:19, and it starts with the admission, "I am a stranger on the earth," and the sermon goes on about pilgrimage and the sorrows of life. And as Van Gogh preaches, he keeps returning to this topic of grief. Sorrow and sadness are repeated several times. He pronounces that our human nature is to be sorrowful because this world will never be enough for us. So he says that the hope of Christianity is this idea that we're just travelers in this world to be freed in death. And near the end of his sermon, he paints a picture with his words of an autumn landscape on a road going up the mountains. He vividly describes the colors before focusing on the traveler going up the road. The traveler meets a woman and asks her, "Does the road go uphill all the way?" And she answers, "Yes, to the very end." The traveler continues walking, thinking of the old saying, "Much strife must be striven, much suffering must be suffered, much prayer must be prayed, and then the end will be peace." Poetically enough, Van Gogh's life would continue to be an uphill battle to the very end. Because of complications in England, he returned to his parents in Holland in 1876, where he took up work in a bookshop where he became even more religious, translating the Bible into English, French, and German. To support his religious fervor, his father sent him to his uncle, a respected theologian in Amsterdam. Vincent prepared for the University of Amsterdam theology entrance examination, but he didn't pass. He later took a 3-month theology course in Brussels, but he also failed at that. Very interestingly, despite his religious passion, he was not considered a passable Christian thinker by the standards of the church. And later, he would know that the way he practiced Christianity would also be deemed as unacceptable. After failing at systematic theology, he was still able to find a position as a missionary in a working-class coal mining town in Belgium. But his heart was so struck by the poverty he saw around him that he gave up his lodgings, his possessions, and even his meager salary for the homeless and lived in a hut with straw for a bed. But these actions got him kicked out of the church for undermining the dignity of the priesthood. So this mad lad walked for 75 kilometers all the way back to Brussels and returned to his parents in Holland, where his father threatened to have him locked up in an asylum. But all of these frustrations and rejections would now lead Van Gogh back to art with a philosophy that he had both learned and created throughout all of these experiences. We can piece together Van Gogh's Christian philosophy through his letters, especially the ones to his beloved younger brother, Theo. Vincent's Christian philosophy was to accept the totality of life, both beauty and suffering, and to defy trying to idealize or rationalize the world, and that for him was to love and to know God. The theologians around him kept trying to determine truth, beauty, and righteousness for other people, but this only led to the church consolidating wealth and power to herself, even standardizing beauty to herself, and thus ignoring those in poverty, in asylums, and the beauty of everyday life. For me, that God of the clergy is as dead as a doornail. But does that make me an atheist? Clergymen consider me one, but you see, I love, and how could I feel love if I were not alive myself, or if others were not alive? And if we are alive, then there is something wondrous about it. Now, call that God or human nature of whatever you like, but there is a certain something I cannot define systematically, although it is very much alive and real. And you see, for me, that something is God. As Vincent saw it, if you truly practice the art of Christian love, you will love and accept everything, even what you don't yet understand, even those in sorrow and suffering, even the things in life that you have grown over familiar with and see as mundane, because Christian love isn't necessarily about the world being lovable, but it's about you being loving. That's what makes you like Christ. It's not about finding meaning only in the grandiose things, but it's about finding love and beauty and meaning in the ignored and downtrodden things, people, and experiences. It's not that this will make you happy, whatever that means. Reading his letters, I am thoroughly convinced that he is one of the most depressive people I have ever read, which is impressive to say the least. But going back to his sermon, you could say that maybe human happiness was never the point. If you're a Christian and truly believe that your soul was made for a world beyond this one, then don't be surprised at the omnipresence of sorrow and pain. But you shouldn't lock yourself away from these things, because Christianity is about how you can accept them even unto death, and that makes you like Christ. Not sealing yourself off from life in your idealizations, rationalizations, and ivory tower theologies. Van Gogh would continue that same repudiation of institutionalized standards all the way to the art academy he attended in 1880. He returned to his family again in 1881 and became fascinated with drawing everyday scenes and using his neighbors as subjects. He famously defied his father's insistence that he should attend church. Rather, he continued being reacquainted with art and was slowly introduced to watercolor and oils. For the next 7 years, he would travel from city to city as a highly unconventional artist with odd colors, subjects, and perspectives as he slowly nurtured the artistry that the world would eventually know him for. In 1888, he would famously have the ear incident as well as subsequent mental breakdowns, which were symptoms of his deteriorating mental condition. And so in 1889, he was admitted to the St. Paul Asylum. Letters to his brother Theo reveal to us his last year's insights. Van Gogh wrote that Christ lived as an artist greater than all artists, disdaining marble and clay and paint, working in living flesh. That is, this extraordinary artist, hardly conceivable with our modern minds, made neither statues, nor paintings, nor even books. He states it loud and clear. He made living men. His spoken words, which he didn't even deign to write down, are one of the highest summit attained by art, which in them becomes a creative force, a pure creative power. These reflections take us a very long way, raising us above art itself. They enable us to glimpse the art of being alive. Van Gogh knew that his greatest talent was the ability to respect life and beauty as they came. He didn't worry about systematic theological reasons, and in doing so, he was able to paint masterpieces out of what others would have passed as mundane. He was rejected from preaching this philosophy. He didn't think that he could write books about it, but he could help us see it. I still believe that his paintings are not strictly Christian art, but interpreted as Christian art, his paintings remind us that maybe God isn't hiding in the grand churches and grand biblical scenes. Maybe he's not even with the pastors and the theologians. Maybe he's hiding right here behind our hearts, living in the simple things like the words and deeds between us, and in coal miners, potatoes, and flowers. Because these churches were made by men, but the starry night sky, God made that himself as his cathedral. His paintings are aligned with the Christian call to be truly alive, because the more that you love many things and many people, the more you are alive, the closer you already are to God.